Well, it's a funny sort of a thing. You hear about sportsmen. If you're going to be good at anything, you leave the country. And actors, of course, used to go off to England. And if you're in sports or acting these days, you go off to America. Well, it happened to me by accident. I was interested in politics and issues, and I ended up in America not because I went on purpose, but I worked for the biggest game in the world, as you've just seen on television. I mean, I just read this morning that when Harris decided that she was running, she got $1 billion in donations. I mean, mega money for a person to become the president of the United States. And I was in there. I was working with them. I could call anyone in the White House and I could get interviews. I even demanded that people who work for the White House show up because I was subpoenaing them to come over and they would testify because I wrote the letter. When I came back to Australia, and the question was, why did I? I suppose I was patriotic. I was at a brink that I'd worked for the system for 5 years and I remained Australian. But I'd hit my limit where I basically had to become an American citizen if I wanted to really keep up the job. But I thought I could bring back whatever I'd done, what talent I had, and come back and work in the Australian system. But I was naive because, I mean, that is the ocean of politics, and I really did step back into the pond. And it took me 2 years to calm down before I could have a civil conversation where people could talk to me, because the amount that the billions of dollars that went through my head when I thought economics or the major programs or the decisions that we were making were far above and beyond anything that goes on here. And often politics comes over as just squabbling rather than foresight or entrepreneurial approaches to major problems. So anyway, I mean, I came back and in some ways maybe it was a mistake. I should have stayed in America. But anyway, I'm glad. I love the country. I severely love the country. And it's not the political game, but in politics, there's sort of only so much you can take, of course, because it's just every week it's another fight, it's another battle, it's another report. So most people only last 3 years in working in Washington, and I was there for 5, 6 years before I came home.
And then you came down to the little pond
Yeah.
and swum with minnows. So how did that go, and
Well,
where did that take you to?
Well, when I got off the plane, I slept for the first day and I had my family with me. And then I called a fellow by the name of John O. Johnson. He was the president of the New South Wales Senate. Now, he had met me in Washington. He had been invited to the prayer breakfast that happens every year. And this is several thousand people come in for a couple of weeks and they have stacks of meetings. And eventually we all have breakfast with the president. So I'd worked with these people, a Christian organisation that had been going since the Second World War. And so I had breakfast with the president for 3 years in a row. And so he saw me in this context that I wasn't just an Australian. I was helping to organise all of this and being treated as I was a celebrity, as senior professional staff. So he befriended me. And when I came back, I gave him a call, told him I was back in Australia. He picked up the phone and he said, I want you to go down to Canberra tomorrow. So he called Graham Richardson and he said, in Labor Party talk, he said, I'm sending Christopher Reynolds down to see you tomorrow. He's good value. Whenever he shows up, drop what you're doing and talk to him. Then he called Beasley and he said the same thing. I'm sending Chris down to talk to you tomorrow. Just meet him. And I think Lionel Bowen as well. So I was on the plane the next morning and in Canberra, and Beasley offered me the job of ambassador, the Australian ambassador back to Washington, because nobody in the country had my experience with Washington. But I said, oh, well, I've just got back from Washington. I don't really want to go. And I mean, I've been kicking myself ever since, Basically being offered the job of, consul general or the ambassador. And I said, no, I don't think so.
Well, we were all entitled
well,
to a mistake, but anyway, yeah.
well, I went on to be head of the World Trade Center and put that into Sydney, and all that Darling Harbour was all my work. I was the executive officer in charge of Darling Harbour, all the ports, And I also did the Grim Reaper campaign. You may remember that years ago.
Yeah, for AIDS.
Yeah, well, I knew more about the subject than anybody else in the country, and I wrote the report. And Ida Buttrose was the chairman of the committee, and she looked at me and listened to what I had to say, and she said, "You know, you've got the job." But the next day, the leading public relations company in Australia were really upset that I'd won the competition and they didn't. So they said, "How about we pay you 3 times as much money than what you're going to get, and come and work for us?" And I said, "Well, I didn't want to be Mr. AIDS anyway," and I walked away from all of that. The fellow holding up the flipboards for me in the back of the room, a young fellow that worked for Grey Advertising, who came up with the stupid idea of the Grim Reaper. And now the Grim Reaper was all my work, because people would not believe how serious this disease was going to be in Australia. So I developed the Grim Reaper concept, but this young fella decided that the Grim Reaper was going to do bowling and bowl down people at the bottom of the thing, only because I don't know what he was smoking at the time, but he also did bowling the night before and decided that he was going to do up all the drawings of the Grim Reaper doing bowling balls. So when I walked away from that, then the media suddenly said, "Well, this guy Reynolds, Christopher Reynolds, has won this thing. Where is he?" But it turned out the kid at the back of the room's name was Simon Reynolds. And so they pinned it all on Simon and gave him the credit. But Simon went on to do absolutely nothing. He never came up with one original thought from that time forward. And I went on to get 5 contracts with BHP and work on some marvellously huge contracts. So anyway, that's me coming back to Australia.